So this is the last PowerPoint of Chapter 12. I know you're thinking, yay, it's the last PowerPoint. I'm probably going to divide it into a couple different sections because there's a lot of information in this yet. But we're going to be talking about vascular disorders, split into arterial and venous disorders, and shock. So the first part of vascular disorders is arterial diseases, and the first thing we're going to talk about is hypertension or high blood pressure. So hypertension is a very common problem. In the text, it says that estimates indicate 1 in 3 adults has high blood pressure. And within this group, 1/3 are undiagnosed, and some are not controlled. Men are more likely to have high blood pressure under the age of 55, but then after 55, women catch up. But blood pressure may occur in any age group, and it is more common in individuals of African ancestry. So sometimes they will classify high blood pressure or hypertension as systolic or diastolic. Diastolic pressure is the pressure that's measured when your heart relaxes between beats. That's when the heart is filling, then diastole. And systolic pressure is measured when the heart contracts. So high blood pressure is considered to be the silent killer, meaning that a lot of times it's asymptomatic in the early stages. And even when people do start to have symptoms, the symptoms are often vague and nonspecific and can be easily ignored by some people. So we're going to divide it into a couple different types, really categories: primary, secondary, and malignant. So primary hypertension, also called essential hypertension, is idiopathic, and it's really the definition of it is your blood pressure is consistently above 140/90 millimeters of mercury. It may be age adjusted, meaning for older adults, they tend to have a greater pulse pressure, so there's more difference between the systolic and the diastolic. So you might get someone that has a very high systolic and their diastolic is not very high, or vice versa. Someone with a high diastolic and their systolic is not very high. Both of them are considered hypertension. Primary hypertension is caused by an increase in arterial or vasoconstriction. So they don't necessarily know what causes that, but over a long period of time it can damage arterial walls, and you get blood supply reduced to involved areas, and it can develop into ischemia and necrosis of tissues with loss of function. Secondary hypertension means there's another cause, like renal or endocrine disease. So nephrosclerosis, or hardening of the kidneys, or diabetic neuropathy, those can both cause secondary hypertension. A benign tumor of the adrenal medulla can cause secondary hypertension. So usually when we're dealing with secondary hypertension, the underlying problem has to be addressed in order to reduce the blood pressure. So they don't just use blood pressure medications like they do with primary hypertension. They actually have to address whatever the underlying problem is. So with malignant or resistant hypertension, it's uncontrollable, severe, and rapidly progressive with many complications. So, and a lot of times in malignant hypertension, the diastolic pressure is extremely high. And a lot of times, it's really considered an emergency when the diastolic pressure is extremely high. A lot of times it results from organ damage, damage to the central nervous system, or the renal system. So that is something that really needs to be addressed immediately. It's not a chronic long-term problem. It's a short-term immediate problem. So the diastolic pressure is important because it indicates the degree of peripheral resistance and the increased workload on the left ventricle. So you can have mild, moderate, or severe hypertension, and it's definitely something that needs to be treated because it can cause a lot of damage in other parts of the body, all over the body, really. So this is a nice chart from the book that shows the development over hypertension, of development of hypertension from different areas. So the arrows coming in from the left, those are the primary hypertension, and the arrows coming in from the right, those are the secondary hypertension. But the results are often similar, and the reading that you get is increased blood pressure. So this is super relevant to us in physical therapy because we don't want to be making people exercise or exert themselves or do certain things when their blood pressure is really high. So it's important to monitor people and kind of know what their status is. Does this person have hypertension, and know what we can do to help with that. Sometimes what we can do is to terminate the PT session and send them to their doctor. So it's important that we are on top of that. There's one PTA that works in my clinic, and she's the blood pressure queen. She's always really on top of monitoring people's blood pressures, and she gets people to their doctor right away, and so we call her the blood pressure queen. It's not because she causes our blood pressure to go up, because she doesn't. So the areas, so if you have ongoing hypertension, the reason they call it the silent killer is because it can damage the kidneys, the heart, the brain, the retina. So, you know, all very important things. The incidence of hypertension increases with age when you're working with an older population, which if you work in PT, you're working with an older population. Most people are on blood pressure medications, a lot of them. Men are often affected sooner and more severely, and then incidence in women increases after middle age. There are certainly genetic factors. There are some controllable factors like sodium intake, alcohol intake, obesity, smoking, and prolonged or recurrent stress. But obviously, your gender and your genetic factors, you can't do anything about that. So here's just a little graphic that shows some of the effects of uncontrolled hypertension. So you get damage of the arteries in the retina, and that's what causes problems with the retina. You can have a stroke. That could be a problem. Atherosclerosis, you get buildup of plaques in the arteries. With heart, it can affect the heart. It can affect the kidneys, and so it's really important to make sure that is monitored and controlled. So, like I said before, the hypertension is frequently asymptomatic in the early stages, and sometimes the initial signs are pretty vague. Fatigue, malaise, sometimes morning occipital headache. So you can probably think of a million other things by this point that cause those non-specific symptoms. There are lots of different things that can cause that. So normally when somebody goes in and they are first diagnosed with essential hypertension, they treat it in steps. So the first thing they do is lifestyle changes. Take steps to try to reduce your stress, see what exercise you're doing, reduce sodium intake, reduce weight. Medications, diuretics like hydrochlorothiazide that I've talked about before, are often one of the first things used to control essential hypertension. ACE inhibitors like lisinopril. The drug combination, a really common drug combination is hydrochlorothiazide and lisinopril, and they're in the same pill. So it's an ACE inhibitor and a diuretic. So that's usually how essential hypertension is treated. Going on from hypertension, peripheral vascular disease or atherosclerosis, and we talked about this a little bit, basically disease in arteries outside the heart. And with diabetes, you have increased incidence of atherosclerosis. Diabetes is a terrible disease. It does a lot of things to you. It affects a lot of your organ systems. And uncontrolled diabetes is awful. It really damages your body, so it's difficult. The most common sites of peripheral vascular disease are the abdominal aorta, the carotid arteries, and the femoral and iliac arteries. They'll do Doppler studies to assess blood flow and arteriography to look at blood flow. And then there is another, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that word, but it's imaging that measures the size of limbs and blood volume in the organs or tissues. You can learn how to pronounce that word on your own. It's not one that I've ever had to say, thank goodness, and I'm not going to say it today. The signs and symptoms of peripheral vascular disease: increasing fatigue and weakness in the legs. And you often hear this intermittent claudication, which is leg pain that's associated with exercise. And the cause of it is ischemia to the muscles. So people say, well, I'm doing fine, and then when I get up to walk, after I'm up for a certain amount of time, I will start to have pain in my legs. So that's the intermittent part. It comes on just after they've been up walking for a while. And then when they sit down and rest, it goes away. So that's a really common sign of peripheral vascular disease. And you'll hear that a lot in the clinic. You can get sensory impairment, tingling, burning, numbness. A lot of times those are nerve signs. You get those sensory nerve signs. Peripheral pulses that are distal to an occlusion can become weak. So if somebody has an iliac artery occlusion, if you take their distal pulses, those pulses are going to be weak. The appearance of the skin and feet of the legs can change as a result of peripheral vascular disease. You might get pallor, paleness, or cyanosis, which is that blue tinge. The skin can be dry and hairless, and the toenails get thickened and hardened. I was working with a gentleman the other day who has diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and he's had it for a very long time. And you can see in his legs the peripheral vascular effects from that. He does have very pale skin on his legs. It's dry and hairless, and he has those thick and hard toenails, just, by the book. And even if you didn't know his medical history, you could look at those signs and make a pretty good guess at it. So the treatment for atherosclerosis is controlling blood glucose level. So getting the diabetes under control, reducing body mass index, reducing serum cholesterol level, platelet inhibitors or anticoagulation medication. A lot of times people are on things like Plavix or warfarin, Coumadin is the other name for that, to prevent their blood coagulating. Stop smoking. Increase activity and exercise. Maintaining dependent position for the legs, meaning the legs are hanging down like when you're in a chair. And it improves arterial perfusion. Peripheral vasodilators they'll use, and medications, and really watching the skin for breakdown and treating things promptly, because people who have peripheral vascular disease have more of a chance of developing an infection, and they might get gangrene and have to have an amputation, and that would be a serious problem. So in physical therapy, we can help people with increasing their activity and exercise, help them with positioning, teach them how to do skin checks, and helping them with their exercise and their activity can help their cholesterol level and their body mass index and maintaining their blood glucose level. So there are lots of things that we can do to help these people, even though we're not doing the medication part. I like to think of exercise as medication, because it can really help improve a lot of these things. So one of the complications, arterial complications that can happen is an aortic aneurysm. And an aneurysm, it's a localized weakening and dilation of the arterial wall. And basically, it's a defect in the medial layer of the artery. So there are different shapes, and there's a graphic in the book that talk about different shapes. And yeah, there's the graphic. Okay, we'll look at it in a minute. The saccular is a bulging wall on the side of the artery. Fusiform is a circumferential dilation. And just like a fusiform muscle, it's like thin on the ends and fat in the middle, just like that. A dissecting aneurysm develops when there's a tear in the intima of the wall and blood continues to dissect or separate tissues. So a dissecting aortic aneurysm can kill you. It's a very serious complication. So this is the fusiform. It sort of bulges out on both sides. The saccular bulges out on one side, and a clot or thrombus can form there. And the dissecting aneurysm is where there's that tear in the intima, and the blood flows between the layers of walls. So you can get serious arterial internal bleeding from that, and that usually requires surgical repair. So aortic aneurysms are caused by atherosclerosis. They could be caused by trauma, syphilis or other infections, or congenital defects. So in the congenital chapter, last quarter we talked about Marfan syndrome. So Marfan syndrome is a connective tissue disorder, and it's congenital. And dissecting aortic aneurysm is one of the potential complications of Marfan's. So with an aortic aneurysm, when you listen with a stethoscope or auscultate, you might hear a bruit, which is I've never heard one, but I've heard it described as sort of a glugging sound in the abdominal aorta. Sometimes you can feel a pulse when you palpate their abdomen. A lot of times aortic aneurysms are asymptomatic until they become enlarged or they rupture. So you could have a small rupture that causes moderate bleeding, but a lot of times you get a severe rupture, and that can actually cause death. So a very serious condition. So the way they diagnose it is radiography, ultrasound, and CT scanning, and MRI. So the treatment for aortic aneurysm is to maintain your blood pressure at normal level. So if you have an aortic aneurysm and your blood pressure goes higher, there's more of a chance of it rupturing. You want to prevent sudden elevations caused by exertion, elevations in blood pressure. You want to prevent stress, coughing, and constipation. And surgical repair, that's really the way that you need to fix it before things go bad. But it might be asymptomatic. You might not know you have it. Sometimes people will get diagnosed with an aortic aneurysm when they're getting checked for something else, and it gets noticed in imaging, and then you can take all those preventative measures. So this is an abdominal aortogram showing an aortic aneurysm, and that looks, just from the shape of it, it looks like a fusiform aneurysm, but that's a pretty neat picture, I think. Okay, in the next section we're going to talk about venous disorders.